So welcome again, and very excited to introduce tonight Polly DeMille. Polly is an exercise physiologist and the director of performance services at Hospital for Special Surgery. She has her master's in exercise physiology from Adelphi University and started her career as an intensive care nurse. She's a clinical exercise physiologist through the American College of Sports Medicine and an NSCA certified strength and conditioning specialist. At HSS, Polly oversees all aspects of performance programming, from sport-specific analysis to metabolic testing to training clients across the spectrum of age and ability. Her research interests focus on bridging the gap between injury and return to peak performance. And she has authored chapters, journal articles, and presented nationally on this topic. Polly has also made numerous appearances in national media, serving as an expert on the science behind fitness trends. So I couldn't think of anyone better to give this presentation this evening. And thank you so much, Polly. I will turn it over to you.
Thanks. Thank you, Claudia. And thank you guys all for coming. I'm happy to be here and see all you starting off the new year thinking about your fitness. So I think it is sort of a timely topic, because at the beginning of the year is often the time that everybody sort of reassesses where they are and where they hope to be over the coming year. So what we're going to do tonight is go over kind of how we as exercise physiologists think about fitness, and how when we're working with somebody, we try to determine strategically what's the best training program for that person. Where are their weak links, where are their strengths, and how can we make this person be the best they can be? And that's what we're going to go over tonight, is just sort of how we approach fitness. And then we'll have a little self-assessment, so you can also come up with kind of your own insight into maybe what your fitness program ought to focus on this year. And happily, I have Pam Geisel here with me, who is a fellow exercise physiologist. She is the manager of performance, and we're distanced enough that we, but she'll be helping as well. So we're happy about that. So I'm going to share my screen for a few slides, and then we'll go, when we get to the self-assessment part, we will go back to kind of demonstrating what we're talking about. So essentially what we're thinking about is when we, whether it's any client, any age, whatever, we want to get a sense of what's somebody's overall fitness like. And how do we do that? Well, we think about fitness as a pyramid. And I think that's one way to kind of break down and understand sort of how do you build a fitness program if you understand the components of fitness. So I think many people sort of think about the top of that pyramid, which is, I want to play tennis, I want to go skiing, I want to run a marathon, or something as simple as I want to be able to get up and down off the ground and play with my grandchildren. You know, whatever that sort of functional activity that you think of as, this is what I want to be able to do, that doesn't just happen out of magic. It happens as a result of a bunch of different pieces coming together to allow you to do this motion. So fitness is really built on a solid foundation of strength, postural alignment and balance, joint range of motion and flexibility, body composition and nutrition, and cardiovascular fitness. So all of these things are important, and they all have to be kind of on point in order for you to be able to do the things you want to do well, without pain and without risking injury. So injuries, illnesses, poor performance are much more likely to occur if that base of the pyramid is out of whack. Sort of on that base is built things like, agility, dodging a bike when you're trying to cross the street, or hurrying across the street, or jumping high. Those type of things are all built on all of these various components. So we're going to go over some of these components, each one of these. But first, I just want you to think about your own personal pyramid. So if we think about somebody like a marathon runner, the base of their pyramid is pretty imbalanced, and not always, but I would say for most runners, they like to run. That's all they go out every time they have free time to do some exercise, they're going to spend it running. So as a result, often they have muscle imbalances and weaknesses in certain parts of the body that are not involved in running. So perhaps their the lateral sides of their hips or their upper body may be relatively weak in comparison to their leg muscles. They don't think a lot about posture because they're running all the time. And if you've ever watched the end of the New York City Marathon, you can see some pretty poor posture. And mobility, they generally are going to get tight hamstrings and various places that get tight. Body composition, they may actually not have as much muscle mass as you'd think. They're not, or their diets may not be good, but they're spending all their time on one piece of the pyramid. And as a result, the injury rate in runners is relatively high. And some of it may be due to just that. The other thing is to think about what does the pyramid look like for people who just play a sport. So when we see many young athletes here who are injured, they started playing soccer when they were 5 years old, and that's all they ever do. They've never done anything else. They don't stretch, they don't do strength training. That's all their free time is spent playing that sport. And with adults, people who, let's say, play tennis or golf every weekend and they don't do anything else the rest of the week, they're very also imbalanced and much more likely to get hurt or perform poorly, just because, again, they are not addressing each of those kind of components that are going to allow them to swing a golf club without hurting their back or deliver more power to the club through their hips. So strength training, stretching, all those things that come into play to allow you to do your sport well, those are kind of the pieces of the puzzle that you have to put together in order to perform well. And if you think about it, it's just like a diet. If all you ate every day was, apples, well, apples are great, but you're probably going to miss out on adequate protein, and you may not be getting enough calcium and those sorts of things. So just like you want to have a varied diet to be as healthy as possible, you also want a varied exercise program to build ideal fitness. So just going through these components, let's talk about strength. So we think about muscular strength and endurance as obviously one of the key components of fitness. And strength and endurance will improve athletic performance, help decrease risk of injury, increase your resting metabolic rate, and strength training can also maintain or increase your bone density and bone mass. So it's important. When we talk about muscular strength, we're thinking about the ability of the muscle to exert force, and really just kind of that one, how strong is that muscle? Muscular endurance is the muscle's ability to keep exerting force, to continue to perform many repetitions of something with adequate force. So in general, the guidelines for strength training are that adults should perform activities that maintain or increase muscular strength and endurance for all the major muscle groups, a minimum of 2 days a week. So generally 2 days a week is great. If you do 3, you may see more gains, but a minimum of kind of 2 days a week to improve your strength. And when they talk about major muscle groups, you think about muscles that push, that pull, squatting, so the fronts of the body, the back of the body, those major muscle groups. So just, on your own selves, kind of think about, are you doing things a couple of days of the week for each of these muscle groups to get them stronger? Next, let's talk about static and dynamic postural alignment. And when we talk about static postural alignment, that means if you're like right now, I'm sitting. What is my posture like sitting? Am I, most of us are kind of slumped over versus sitting up tall in our chairs. You may not have ideal posture sitting in your chair. And then when you stand up, what we look at in postural alignment standing is when you're not asking your body to do anything other than hold yourself up against gravity, what does that look like? And for many people, they're kind of wearing their chairs. They stand up and they're slumped over their computer, whatever, they're, sitting in a chair, they get up and they're still slumped over. They're still kind of in that same posture, but now they're just standing up. So that is something we think about a lot, because that's your habitual, the habitual position your joints are in. And if your shoulders are rotated forward just, most of the time, things like shoulder impingement, shoulder pain, neck pain, back pain, those things are much more common if you're having that posture. And if you're sitting all the time, your glutes, your butt tends to get a little weak. And it also, you get tight in the front of your hips, so it gets even harder for you to use your butt muscles. And we think about that as something that is just a result of habitual posture that will definitely impact your performance in your daily activities, and it'll definitely increase risk of injury if you have tight, weak hips. So thinking about those things, just the way you move all day is something you want to think about. It's going to have an impact because you do it many times a day sitting at a desk. The other thing we think about as far as dynamic alignment is when we're thinking about how do people move, which happens to be our tagline for this hospital, but it really is important. So how do you pick things up? Are you using your back? Are you using your legs? Are you keeping your spine in good alignment? How are you getting up and down out of a chair? Are you using your hips to do that? Are you putting a lot of stress through the front of your knees? Just simple, normal motions that we go through day in and day out. If you're doing those with poor mechanics, poor alignment, that can cause significant wear and tear and lead to injuries and weaknesses and so forth. So we look at, when we're looking at people, they're just regular posture, and then how do they move in common movement patterns, squatting, bending over and picking things up, pushing, pulling. What do they look like when they do those motions? And are there simple corrections they could do that would reduce risk of injury and actually make them much more functional and able to perform better? So balance exercises are important in this regard as well, because many activities are you're doing one leg at a time. You walk one leg at a time, you run one leg at a time. When you're playing tennis or whatever, you're just, going from one leg to the other. So balance exercises are key, and they also have a lot to do with your core. So being able to balance well requires having a basically pretty strong core. And excuse me, these are just some examples of simple things that we do to work on postural alignment and core strength. So things like planks, which you start, if you just look at the top and kind of go down that, you see it gets progressively harder. So a modified plank, a full plank, and then a plank just on one foot with hip extension. So it's when and many of you are probably familiar with planks, but if you think about a plank, the goal is that you're strengthening all those postural muscles. And if you flipped somebody upright who's doing a plank, you should see ideal posture. Many people kind of hunch over doing them, but the goal is that you get those postural muscles that hold the spine in good alignment. Really, a plank is a head to toe exercise that's working the back of the body, the front of the body, the shoulder stabilizers, everything. And it just is really working on things that should translate to better alignment in just normal daily motions. Side planks are going to work the lateral side of your body. Same thing. You're just trying to create that support along the sides of your body that should translate to just better alignment and better support when you're just going through the rest of your day doing whatever it is that you do. So now let's talk about joint range of motion and flexibility. So that's another part of the base of this pyramid. And joint range of motion flexibility, this is the ability to move your joints through their full range of motion without strain on the joint or the tissue. And a lot of this is genetic. I mean, some people are born, with relatively tight joints, and other people are hypermobile. So, certainly people who go into things like ballet are probably genetically gifted in terms of mobility. Physical activity has a lot to do with it. Sort of your habitual activities will make certain muscles tighter and shorter than others. Your age, none of us get more flexible as we age. Typically, our tissues get a little stiffer. Your gender, previous injuries are going to impact your joint range of motion and mobility, and temperature. You're obviously a little more, once your body temperature goes up, your muscles tend to be a little more pliable. So they all play a role in your flexibility. But it's important to think about that, because on the one hand of the one side of the coin, if you're limited, if you're super tight and your joint can't go through its full range of motion, your body's always you ask your body to do something, it's gonna find a way to get there. They're gonna find the path of least resistance. And if it can't move this one joint, it's gonna find another way to get there. And that's often gonna put strain on other joints and other tissues. So trying to maintain adequate mobility is important. The other side of this would be people who are hypermobile. They're super lax, super flexible, people whose elbows kind of bend backwards and knees bend backwards and stuff. Those people are typically at also greater risk of injury if they don't have the adequate stability, meaning that they don't have the muscles to control that motion in the joint when they're doing things so that they're avoiding excess strain on the joint. So either too little flexibility or too much can be things that can be problematic. And so we just want to kind of see where are people at in terms of their flexibility. And this also can be very joint specific. Some people can have normal range of motion in a shoulder, for example, and not in the other shoulder, or in their knees, but not their hips, that type of thing. So it's important to kind of notice whether you've got any limitations. And if so, you know, foam rolling, stretching, yoga, things that sort of address that are good things to consider. Now let's just talk about body composition, nutrition, and lifestyle. So this is kind of a big bucket, but I think a lot of times, and especially at the beginning of the year, people are kind of focused on body composition and weight. And we really are not so concerned with body fat here as far as a factor in fitness. Weight is really not good as a sole measure of body composition because it fluctuates a lot on a daily basis, but it really just looks at quantity and not quality. Looking at somebody's weight is not going to tell me much about their percent body fat, how much lean mass they have, how much muscle mass they have, how much, whether they have adequate bone density. A number on a scale really is not all that helpful as far as giving me any indication about fitness. So we kind of are more interested on muscle mass and bone health versus, you know, how much fat somebody has. Do they have adequate muscle mass? Do they have good bone health? And those are really much more critical in terms of fitness. So key factors for improving body composition. Obviously, you need to be eating well. Your muscles are made of they need the building blocks to be able to build protein and muscle fibers and so forth. You have to be supplying your body with a proper nutrition in order to see any improvements. You have to sleep. You have to get adequate sleep and stress management. And I can't think of anyone better to give us a little insight into what happens when you sleep than Pam, who is actually quite an expert on that. So you want to give us a couple of words on what happens and why sleep is important?
Yeah, sleep is definitely important. And hopefully some of you joined me a few months ago when I gave the sleep talk for Patient Whole Again. But it's actually kind of where all the magic happens in terms of rest and recovery of our muscle tissue. And it's where HGH is released, so your human growth hormone. And you know how important that is for muscle growth, just because that's why it's on the doping list, And so it's definitely really important in terms of just that muscle quality and building that strength. But it goes beyond that too, in terms of decision making and reflexes, and just being able to perform. So when we're lacking sleep, we put ourselves in kind of that sleep deficit. It affects our ability to recover, it affects ability to generate strength, and it impacts our ability to perform. So you really get kind of hit from all directions. So sleep is absolutely essential. And, it even goes in, the reason we put this all in the same bucket is because sleep affects some of our hormones that regulate our hunger. So that will then sway body composition a little bit. It affects our ability to deal with stress. So all this triangle is so complex because everything is very woven into each other and translates back to our fitness goals.
So that's why we don't just focus on body fat. We think body composition is super important, but there are so many factors that play a role in it that we want people to be mindful of that. Okay, so then finally, cardiovascular fitness, which is really, your heart's like any other muscle. It's got to get some exercise to stay strong. And the American College of Sports Medicine and the American Heart Association, CDC, the basic sort of universal guidelines for the what is recommended as far as exercise for all healthy adults, really 18 and up. The guideline is to really participate in moderate intensity aerobic physical activity for a minimum of 150 minutes a week. And ideally you spread that over most, if not all days of the week, you do something. And really moderate means moderate. And you're not gasping for air, you're breathing comfortably, you can hold a conversation, you're warm, but you're not like gushing sweat. It's like moderate intensity. It's a comfortable, pleasant zone for most people to be exercising in. Vigorous or the other part of that is you could do 75 minutes of vigorous intensity aerobic activity over the course of the week. So that would come out to 15 minutes or so, 5 days a week. And that would be more like you're breathing hard, you're speaking in shorter sentences. You could still talk, but it would be less, and you're sweating. So that would be vigorous intensity exercise. But just kind of think about what you're doing, and are you meeting these guidelines? Because we know not only just in terms of fitness of your cardiovascular system, but there are countless benefits that have been proven over decades of what cardiovascular exercise does for you in terms of psychological benefits, hormones, reducing risk of diabetes, and improving bone. There's just a million things that you can benefit from by just getting out there and moving. So those are kind of that's kind of the base of that pyramid. And that's really, those pieces are what all this other stuff is built on. So once you've got this solid foundation, okay, now it's going to be much more easy to dodge a bike that's coming at you when you're trying to cross the street. You're going to have the joint range of motion, the endurance, the strength, all those things you're going to need to be able to be more powerful, more agile, and to be quicker. And then obviously all those now come into whatever your sport or your goal in terms of fitness is you're much more likely to achieve that goal, perform well at that goal, and to not get injured doing it if all those pieces at the base of the pyramid are kind of on point. So thinking about what the demands of your sport are, what your goals are, you can kind of think about what some of those pieces of the puzzle may be lacking in your current exercise plan. So what we're going to do now is go through just kind of an assessment of to get an idea kind of some of these components. So we'll look at a little bit of flexibility. We'll take a look at some indications of strength, the core, the upper body, and the lower body. And we'll just take a look at posture. And really, you're if you have a mirror there or just on your own, just kind of, giving yourself a sense of, okay, where am I at now? And maybe this is something I should pay a little more attention to. So I'm going to stop sharing so you can see Pam doing this stuff. There we go. Okay, so let me tip this down. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is we're going to take a look at just a general indication of the flexibility on the front of the body. Okay, so if we think these are really, in an ideal world, we'd be checking every joint and all that. But here we're just getting an idea of, okay, how flexible is she on the front of her body? So first she lies down there, and one thing is that some people are so tight that they'd actually not be able to lie flat on their stomach. So first thing is, you can see she can actually do that. And now let's just have her grab onto her foot and see if she can pull it towards her butt. So those of you that have something you could lie down on the floor could give this a try. So you're just noticing a couple of things. One, how close to your butt can you get that heel? Secondly, when you go to, can you even reach your foot? And then also, if you grab for that foot, do your hips lift up off the ground? So when you're lying there, ideally you're feeling sort of those two hip bones on the ground, and they stay there. Okay, good. That's great. I can see, yep, Sandra could use a little bit of flexibility, but that's pretty darn good. So yeah, you're just seeing, can you reach it? How close can you get it to the heel to the butt? Do you feel a stretch? The other thing to think about when you're doing this is ideally you feel a stretch in the front of the leg, in the front of the thigh, and no pain in the joint. You should, if you're feeling ever like strain or pain in the joint, you want to stop whatever you're doing. Obviously that isn't the assessment for you if it's causing any joint discomfort. The other thing is to just check each leg against the other. So sometimes we have more range of motion in one side than the other. So now if you notice that this isn't, if you can easily get your heel to your butt, you're like, great, perfect, I'm all set there. But if not, maybe some foam rolling or some stretching would be in order. So next we're going to take a look at the flexibility on the back of the body. So this is just, again, a very general assessment of the posterior chain of your body, meaning the back, the hips, the hamstrings, the calves, all the muscles that line the back of the body. So you're going to start by sitting up with your legs straight out in front of you and your toes pointing towards your nose. Look at that wonderful dog. And so toes are pointing towards your nose. And you're kind of pressing the backs of your legs down into the ground. So you can see Pam is, you know, really her knees aren't bent at all. They're pressed right down into the ground. She's going to first sit up nice and tall and then reach her hands straight out. So her arms are straight out in front of her and then hinge forward. And she is really, I couldn't do that if you paid me. But she's got quite a bit of flexibility. So she's just leaning forward and you can see that her hands reach to her toes. Some of you may be able to reach way past your toes and some of you will, like I would probably just barely get to my knees because my hamstrings are crazy tight. So just notice that. So, and also notice where you feel the stretch. Some people are going to feel that more in the backs of the legs. Some people might feel it in their back. Some people might even feel it in their upper back. So you're just going to notice where do you feel that. That's telling you a little bit about where you might need to work on some stretching. So hamstring stretching, hip stretching, all that kind of stuff. So those two are just kind of this general, how's your flexibility? And hopefully you got a little insight into maybe whether this is something you need to worry about or whether you're already quite flexible. Okay. The next thing we're going to take a look at are some indications of sort of core strength, postural control, and upper and lower body strength. So the first thing we're going to look at is a side plank. Now there's a couple of ways you can do this, but this is assessing strength through the lateral side of your body. So the sides of your hips, the sides of your trunk, your shoulder stabilizers, all that. So you can either do this with your legs out straight. So Pam will demonstrate various methods of doing this. So you can, and we're going to try to do it for 30 seconds. Okay. So up she goes. You want to make sure that your shoulders are stacked, one right on top of the other, and your hips are stacked, one right on top of the other. You want to make sure that your core is tight and you're not rotating forward or back or flexing at the hips. For those of you that are up, when Pam went up, you have another 10 seconds here. And you're just seeing if you can perform this and hold it for 30 seconds. So the first plank we'll do will be, this is called a modified plank. And that's 3, 2, 1, that's 30 seconds. Now she's going to do the other side and show you the more advanced version of this, which would be with your legs out straight. So if that modified plank was plenty for you and you found that that was hard to hold for 30 seconds, stick with that. If that felt easy peasy, you can try the more advanced version. But basically you're just noticing, are you able to keep yourself in one straight line, perfectly stacked for 30 seconds? So ready, set, up she goes. Okay, so what you're looking for is that straight line from the head to the toes. The shoulders are up, one right on top of the other one. The hips stay stacked, the core is tight. You can see she's demonstrating what it would look like if you sagged. And the other thing is sometimes people rotate forward. You just want to stay perfectly straight, core nice and tight. That bottom hip is lifting you up towards the ceiling and you're holding yourself right there. And you have another 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay. So 2 things to notice there. A, how many seconds were you able to hold it? B, where did you feel it? Did you feel that it was like, for some people, their shoulders stability is going to be such that that's kind of a limiting factor. Other people feel like they just can't hold themselves up. So if you had any difficulty with that, a good place to start is just that modified plank. You hold it for a few seconds, come down, and then go back up again. But that exercise is really going to give you sort of lateral support. And we do tend to be a little weaker on the sides, particularly the sides of the hips, because we move this way. We move lateral. We use front to back and not so much side to side. The muscles on the side of the body sometimes get a little weaker, and they have a lot to do with sort of supporting your hips. And that they're important muscles. So that's, yep.
We just had a good question come in about the plank. Can the planks be done if you've had a shoulder or hip replacement?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think once you, yeah, I mean, I just saw somebody yesterday doing a plank with a shoulder replacement, hip replacements for sure. Yeah, I think obviously it depends on where, you know, this would be something that once you've had your physical therapy for your surgery, that would be something you would talk to your physical therapist about when that would be an appropriate time to introduce that, because you know, particularly obviously with a shoulder replacement, you've got to really build up the muscles supporting the joint. And now when you're doing a plank, you're essentially putting your body weight into that joint. So which, you know, eventually will be totally doable, but you need to obviously progress through an appropriate rehab progression and get to the point where that's an appropriate exercise. But usually they go through various, you know, standing stability exercises that will help with that. In order to eventually do that. The other way, there's other ways to mimic that with standing exercises that we can, you know, that do the same kind of thing without having to lean on your shoulder. So there are always plan Bs to get these muscles, but just as a simple assessment, a side plank is kind of what we use. But if that's not appropriate for somebody, like I said, we have a million other ways we can get to evaluating core strength and stability. So the next thing we're going to take a look at is what is overall measure of upper body strength. And an easy measure of that is how many push-ups somebody can do with good form. So I'm going to have Pam show you poor form first. So when you'll see people doing push-ups, they don't really go down very far. Let your back sway. Yeah, that's one thing. Or they get all hunched over. Or they're bobbing their head to, you know, like, anyway. So think about a push-up like a plank. Essentially, it's a moving plank. You want to think the body is a straight line from the head to the toe on a regular push-up. And if you're doing a modified push-up, it's basically a straight line from the head to the knees. And the body moves as one unit. The chest goes all the way down, so roughly about a fist distance. You can put something like a, you know, a ball or a roll of toilet paper that your chest hits that to kind of go down, knowing that you're going down far enough. When you're doing a push-up, your elbows should come out like a 45-degree angle. So if I was looking down on somebody doing a push-up, it looks like an arrow, that their arms, the head is the point of the arrow and the arms are the outside of that arrow, so that not straight out or way in. If you do yoga, you're used to these kind of way in ones. We're talking about a regular push-up, about a 45-degree angle. So the ways to do that, again, are the full push-up, a modified push-up, and you just see how many of those can I do with good form. If you feel your back starting to sag, if you feel, you know, those are all indications that you, you know, it's time to stop. Now, getting better at doing push-ups, for many people, that's a tough exercise. You can start by doing a wall push-up. You just saw Pam demonstrate a push-up onto a slight elevation. Here she's doing a wall push-up. Countertop push-ups when you're waiting for something to heat up in the microwave. Things where you're up at an elevation, you're not lifting so much of your body weight. So it's a great overall exercise to strengthen the upper body. It just gives you a rough idea where you're at in terms of upper body strength. Okay, now we're going to take a look at lower body strength. So for this, we're looking at specifically hip strength. And what we're going to do here is a single leg bridge. So basically what you're going to do here is you lying down on your back with your hands resting by your sides. You want to have your feet, your heels, you know, about maybe 6 inches away from your butt. So you could almost touch your heels, possibly. They're not right there, but they're relatively close. One thing that sometimes happens with a hip bridge is that people get a little hamstring cramping. So we want to avoid that. And sometimes that's just because either their legs are too far away, they're not engaging their core, they're not using the backs of their arms for support. So just think about trying to, you're gonna lift your hips up, but you're also engaging other muscles as well. Okay, so you start in that position. First, think about just tightening your core a little bit. And then you're going to just press into your feet and into the backs of your arms a little bit and lift your hips up off the ground. So first thing is just doing that and seeing if you can do that without any pain. If there is any discomfort, obviously not the exercise for you, and just skip it. Okay, so now bring your hips up and hold them up. All right. So if that's plenty for you, that's plenty for you. The next step to assess would be to put all of your weight into your right foot and then extend your left leg straight out with your knees level with each other and hold it. And here again, we're going to hold this for 30 seconds. But you're looking to see, can you hold it? Or do your hips tip or drop, or does your hamstring cramp? And you're just seeing, can I hold that position for another 10 seconds? 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And then if so, where did you feel the effort? All right. Some people are going to feel that if you have tightness in the front of your leg, you may feel the front of your leg when you're trying to hold yourself up in that position. In an ideal world, you're going to feel that one butt cheek was doing the work. The leg that was on the ground, that's where you're going to feel the muscle that was holding you up. Ideally is that muscle. Okay, so then let's just do the same thing to the other side. Tighten up your core, zip up your abs, press into your arms and lift your hips up. Shift your weight to the left foot, straighten the right leg and hold it. And you're just, again, can I hold this? Am I able to keep my hips level and high? Am I able to do this without my hips dropping or tipping? Am I having any cramping in the backs of my legs? Do I have any shaking, anything like that going on? And we'll just hold this for another 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, done. Okay, so that's giving you ideas about the back of your body, your glute strength. And if that was way too hard, start with just a double leg bridge. And then eventually you'll be able to hold 2 legs up and just without even lifting one foot, just shift your weight from one foot to the other to start getting that idea of one leg being able to hold you up. And eventually you can just march and then progress to a single leg bridge. Okay, now the last thing we're going to do is just posture. So here you're just going to stand up and we're just going to see, sometimes if people have difficulty with any postural muscles or poor posture, their balance is going to be affected by that. So all we're going to do here is see if you can just stand on one foot for 30 seconds. So everybody just shift your weight into that right leg and then take the left foot off the ground, stand up tall like somebody's measuring your height. And we're on the clock here for 30 seconds and just seeing, are you able, how many seconds before you have to put that other foot down or put a hand onto something, just timing that, because that'll be your baseline. And that's where you'll work from that to be able to get stronger. Okay, so we have another 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, put your foot down. So now here you've got the idea, okay, how am I on that right leg? Was that difficult? Was I able to do it? So now let's go to the other leg, same thing. Shift your weight into the left foot and then stand nice and tall, take the other foot off the ground and you're on the clock. So now you're just noticing, okay, how long is it before I have to tap the foot down or put my hand on something for support? Or am I able to just stand there quietly? Do I have to wave my arms around to keep my balance? Just nice and still, that's it. And you've just got another few seconds here for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So that, again, if that was difficult for you, you have a starting point there. You may want to start with just putting your hands on the countertop or the back of a chair and take one foot off the ground and just get used to being on one foot for 30 seconds, holding on before you start taking your hands away and trying to do it without holding on. Things like planks, side planks are very helpful with getting the postural control and strength to maintain balance. And then just practicing balance, because none of us get better with balance as we age. It's one of those things that, you know, just happens that if you don't practice it, it's not going to get any better. So throwing balance in when you're waiting for something, you know, like you're standing there brushing your teeth, you take one foot off the ground, try to do it standing on one leg. When you're waiting for the elevator to come, just pick one foot up and try to stand on one leg. So a lot of these things, the stretches, strengthening, push-up, all these things are things you could actually weave into your day relatively easily without taking a ton of time. But just think about that sort of base of the pyramid, you know, and think, okay, in the course of a week, I want to try to make sure that I've sort of hit these things a few times so that over time you develop a much more kind of global fitness. And you're also addressing the things that maybe are harder for you, because we all tend to do things that are actually easier for us. So people who are flexible tend to love yoga and dance and stuff. And, you know, people who aren't are like maybe not so keen on it. And if you naturally are very strong and, you know, things like lifting weights and that sort of stuff you enjoy, but those things that are harder for you are things maybe you just want to sort of start working on. And there's no bad or good. It's just like you're trying to just wherever you're at right now is your starting point, and think about, okay, let me just work on these things bit by bit. So we're almost out of time, but do people have questions about anything? I hope this was helpful in terms of just getting a little sense of kind of your own fitness right now and where you might benefit from some intervention and more attention.
This is fantastic information and fantastic demonstrations, Pam. Thank you, as always. I surely could not do those bridges, so I'm very impressed. We did have 2 questions. They're a little more specific, but if you don't mind taking a moment to address them.
Sure.
The first was, can you do the bridge after spinal fusion and hardware?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is something that depending, you know, you don't want to make blanket statements, but my guess is if you've had this sort of surgery, you've probably worked with a physical therapist in rehab. So who would be familiar with your specific issues. And that would be somebody you would want to talk to about what is the appropriate way, because again, there's always a million ways to strengthen your core and your hips, and one exercise can be ideal for one person and not for someone else. The other thing is that how you do the exercise can make a huge difference. So sometimes just, you know, somebody comes in and they're doing a bridge and they're like, wow, my back hurts when I do this. And they just haven't been cued correctly. They aren't engaging their core. So I would certainly say that's something, again, that your physical therapist could kind of give you guidance if this is an appropriate exercise for you. And if so, to ensure that your form is good when you're doing it. Because if it isn't, you can obviously, if you're totally just shooting your hips up in the air, you can arch your back and that could be uncomfortable for you. So yeah, form is key, and just making sure in your case that this would be a good exercise.
Right. And one last question. How soon should we see improvements?
Well, you know, that it depends. It kind of depends on what it is you're trying to improve. I think in general, people can see improvements in strength relatively quickly. They may not see it in the mirror. You know, you may not see like, you know, a 6-pack and bulging muscles, but your brain pretty quickly gets better at recruiting muscle fibers and synchronizing muscle fibers. So within a relatively short few weeks, you should see, oh, I can do more push-ups. I can hold my hips up higher. That shouldn't take long for you to perceive that you've gotten stronger, but looking at yourself, you might not notice a difference in muscle size. Flexibility as well is hard because you have to be very persistent with it. But yeah, you can usually see improvements in that. If you're kind of foam rolling and stretching on a daily basis, you'll see some improvements, you know, within a relatively short amount of time, a few days, weeks, and it's not going to be huge, but incrementally, yes. Cardiovascular fitness as well. You start doing that, you're going to find that I can walk, a half a mile now. I'll be able to walk a mile within a few weeks. So a lot of these things, I think what's hard is that when a lot of people measure fitness by the mirror, they look in the mirror and they want to see these big changes in their weight or their muscles or whatever it may be. A lot of changes happen pretty quickly and dramatically that just don't show in a mirror. Your heart gets stronger, so at a given workload, your heart rate will be lower. Your heart's working less hard. You're not going to notice that but you'll start to feel a little more energy and a little like I can go further, I can go faster. But that's not going to show in a mirror. And same thing, like I said, the strengthening, you'll be able to notice changes in how many you can do or how long you can hold something in a relatively short period of time. But when you put your pants on, they may not fit differently right off the bat. So I think it's depending on how you judge progress. But yes, progress can be actually relatively quickly. And honestly, with your posture, just being mindful of it is going to probably in a second, you can improve your posture. If you just kind of think about, let me get my shoulders up, back, engage my core, stand up like somebody's measuring my height. And that's going to make a big difference instantly. It's just a matter of keeping that in your mind and cueing yourself to do it.
Well, I think that's a fantastic note to end on. Thank you so much, Polly and Pam. This truly was wonderful. I sure learned a lot. I hope you all have a wonderful evening and achieve all of those fitness goals that you've been working on. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks for coming.